Welcome to Church 3.0, presented by Apollos, a podcast where we explore the nuances of modern Christian culture and the challenges of cultivating community while maintaining impact and relevance in the church. Join Tyler Vance, COO of Apollos, as he talks to church leaders from around the world to gain a deeper understanding of the Christian faith in a modern context. Push boundaries, change lives, create a more hopeful future.
Hey, thank you for joining us today. I've got a super special guest with us, Jackie Glass. Jackie serves in so many churches doing leadership. She has her own leadership consulting, business, wellness, coaching. Jackie is one of those leaders that does it all. Some ties to the Global Leadership Network as well. Jackie, thank you for joining us today. Anything I missed, anything you'd like to say about what your day-to-day looks like?
That was such a kind introduction. Thank you so much. So grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. My heart is really for wellness, and that what can be most magnetic about us is the wellness inside of us that transfers outside of us. And so my heart is for how do you develop creativity? How do you develop communication? All for the purpose of connection. And so, my day-to-day looks a lot like executive wellness coaching one-on-one with leaders within the church, outside of the church, and business, as well as facilitating teams, as well as preaching. I love to preach. And so there's some guest preaching at different churches around the Chicagoland area as well.
Yeah, you're pretty frequently, I think you were gracious in saying that, you're pretty frequently speaking at a church on a weekend. And so let me just ask what are your plans for this weekend?
Yes. So this weekend is a gymnastics meet with my
Oh,
my fourth grade daughter, which is where else you'll find me on Sundays if there's not a gymnastics meet. But I will be back up in the Rockford area preaching in a few weeks, preaching on the story of Jesus walking on water and what
ooh,
that is. So here we go. It's also tied in with
ooh.
Mother's Day. So I love when everything converges together and we get to assess creativity of scripture in a timely
Oh,
way and how it works. So,
I might want to click into that a little bit. I'm curious, which gospel are you doing that out of?
from Mark. So, we're going to
Okay.
preach from Mark, just starting my original kind of diving into scripture, but this one's going to be from Mark. We're in a series that is all on different encounters with Jesus. And so, falling in
Oh,
love with Jesus, all different encounters with Jesus. And so, I get a cool one. That's what's fun about being a guest preacher at different places is you just get to click into sermon series and just say, all right, what has been done? I'm such a context person. So what have we talked about? How is the
mm,
context of this passage? Who's up after me? And because really when you bring energy from the outside, you're given an incredible opportunity to bring energy to the staff who gets time off, but also to the congregation. And so the graciousness when churches have me to have a different voice, to value that is great.
mm.
But I love the context to say, what is the series? Where are we at? What can we continue to say that will be refreshed and reminded? And what is something unique specifically for this passage? So yeah,
Ooh,
I got a good one. Sometimes they give me
come
really
on.
hard ones, you know?
Like, give me an example of a really hard one. Come on.
Oh man.
You can't not ask that
Oh,
question.
I'm trying to think what was one of the hardest ones. Well, I tend towards grace and kindness, so repentance is a hard one for me. It's all good. I find a way around it, but I like the grace and the kindness and how to do that. So I'm a person who can do truth and grace, but the truth never runs faster than the grace when I'm
Yeah,
talking.
yeah,
And so combining the two is
yeah,
is always
yeah.
helpful for me.
That's good. One of the things is we were talking even before you're just like sharing how you conceptually think about from the stage to the seat, and so you're kind of giving an insight into that. Talk to me how you view your role in bridging that gap and what you bring naturally to that.
Sure. So I was the 16-year-old girl in high school who knew she wanted to be a therapist, knew she wanted to be a counselor.
Mm,
I loved when my friends' boyfriends broke up with them and would find them crying at the locker, right? I was that friend who loved when everybody cried around and I would just dive right in. So I was the girl who early on knew, hey, there's something within restoration and really coming alongside people. And so I thought, well, this
yeah.
is this is the therapy route, this is the counselor route. The
Mm,
the absolute joy it is to be in really the thick of people's stories, to be trusted with story, because everybody's story makes sense in the context of who they are right at this moment. And often what they need is just somebody to sit with them in that, to allow that to emerge, to get unstuck. And so I went the full route thinking that the seat to seat would be how I would best use, how God would have me really be in the flow of his redemption and restoration work. And what surprised me is as I fell in love with the seat to seat conversations, there developed
mm,
this hunger to continue to be a better communicator, different
yeah.
people in different environments, in different settings, and in different ways. And so, what I have really enjoyed doing is not only saying, hey, how do we work seat to seat when it comes to bringing hope, to helping people feel unstuck, to creating movement in their life. But how do you translate what's seat to seat from stage to seat? And if
Ooh.
you've ever been listening to somebody talk, so maybe it's at a conference, maybe it is on a Sunday morning, and you think, it's like I was having coffee with that person, or how did they actually know? And so those are these incredible ways that I feel like when warmth exudes, when we really are creating to communicate, to connect, what we can do is
Mm,
funnel all of those three, that people feel like we're seat to seat, but we can transfer it from stage to seat. And more people, the impact is greater in that moment because of the amount of people who will hear what God has asked us to say.
yeah. Well, and just to like even say that in a different way, my friend Alan George, he talks about like the best communicators. No one really remembers what you said on Monday morning, right?
Yeah.
And so then
Yeah.
how at Apollos, we're bringing a suite of tools alongside of you to go, hey, we care about you enough to continue to put this message in front of you, to continue to enable you to grow, to allow you to experience this thing that could be very pivotal. Like you have the ability to shape what their week looks like.
Yeah.
And that's like this ultimate, like we have this new set of tools in our generation to be able to do that. Um,
And
and
what I
I
think is
think
so
that's really
cool
cool.
about and what I think is so cool about that too, and just the incredible work that Apollos offers and the tools is because, even from a preaching standpoint, you've got 28 minutes, 32 before they, close the curtain on you or whatever you have. And it takes so many times for people to understand and to hear, and they want more. But we also know that in attention spans, and really as a preacher, developing 3 10-minute TED Talks. So you're trying to
Sure.
do the best you can to communicate in ways of truth and hope and warmth and repentance on the hard weeks, and all the different things in which you have to do, but then to have different discipleship moments throughout the week and different conversations. I often think that as a preach, we are just starting the conversation for the week. And we
Oh,
are actually just warming the stage for all these discipleship moments throughout the week. And often we think that this is the pivotal moment, right? This is like in 30 minutes, you're going to change somebody's life. And it is just the start. I love to bake, and I love to bake chocolate chip cookies. I can actually still smell them right now from last night. And what I visualize as I'm preaching is when you are baking, if you take the time to actually take the butter out of the fridge to let it soften, you always get better cookies. But what usually happens is we don't take the butter off. We don't take the butter out to soften it. Instead, we like zap it in
yeah.
the microwave, or we're like trying ways to quickly switch over that. And your cookies are okay, but your end product is not as great. And often for a preach, for me, I
Whoa.
think all I'm really doing is I am setting the stage. I am softening the room. I am taking the time to take the butter out. We are doing high levels of connection with truth, with biblical literacy, all the things we're meant to do. But when we incorporate other tools as a church throughout the week, this is where this is this holistic living that not only the congregation doesn't become dependent on being satisfied with like the butter that's softening. The people who are being discipled, all of us who are being discipled, begin to know that there is a full process and steps throughout the week. And so as a communicator, having
Oh,
tools to be able to connect people to are incredibly helpful and very holistic when we care for people.
well, golly, I'm so my kids and I are walking through the Apostles' Creed right
Mhm,
now.
mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
that's what's happening in our home in the evenings, right?
Wow.
And so just last night we're talking about the communion of saints, and so walking them through Hebrews, right? Like,
Yep,
do
yep,
not neglect
yep,
the gathering,
yep.
right? And in the Western church, that really has been the weekend. Don't neglect your Sunday morning gathering. But then and this is the Vance family exercise. We're going to Acts and going, but every day this is what that expression looked like. So yes, we in our family are very much dedicated to the gathering on the weekend, but this is actually the very thing that the disciples walked out of in their interaction with Jesus and they met daily. And so just to your point of like let's hear the thing on the weekend, but let's take it into our lives throughout the week.
And
Um,
discipleship is really the amount that we're dissatisfied daily, right?
woo,
Because when we're dissatisfied, it leads us to greater growth. It leads us to seeking Jesus in another way. If we continue to be satisfied, that's not really the process of maturity. Contentment is one thing, but discipleship and maturity is another thing. And what's beautiful about that process is that the when we become dissatisfied, we have to hunger for more. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that the church is doing it wrong or maybe I didn't like the preacher or all these things we get caught up in. What if instead we teach people to say, it's a good level of being dissatisfied because it
yeah,
makes you hunger for more. It makes you say, "What else? Is this it? 30 minutes? Is this it? Is there something else? How can I teach my kids? How can I raise them in different ways where this becomes applicable for their life?" And so what if we're content in all things, but what if being dissatisfied actually leads us to greater levels of discipleship? And I think that can just be this beautiful flow of restoration and
yeah.
peace and progress that really happens in people's life.
Well, and you've shared a concept with me before of just like the innovation of yourself over the imitation of others. And I mean, obviously that applies to what you're trying to lead people to when you're speaking on the weekend. That applies in your business as a coach and how to teach people wellness. But I mean, to click in even to the discipleship, like the satisfaction of imitating others versus the dissatisfaction of going, okay, God, what are you birthing that's unique to me? Jackie, how do you get that out of people?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell another story. So when I was 9 years old, we used to always go to Michigan. I live in the Chicagoland area. We would go to Michigan every summer, and there was this spot on the beach where we would go. And I'm one of five kids. I am the loudest. I have the most energy. My voice projects. I think the coin inside voice was really started with me, that there was a key difference between your inside voice and outside voice.
Sure.
And so what happened was, my mom would say, "Jackie, if one of your brothers is swimming out in the water, I want you next to
Mm,
me because they could hear your voice. Like your voice
mm.
is so loud." Now, talk about a moment of blessing or a curse as a parent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
As a
often
parent, was
think
that a
of
good thing?
I often think of that to say, my mom really blessed me instead of cursed me because she said this line to me that I have never forgot. And the Lord has seen it to fruition. 9 years old, standing on the speech, and she would say, Jackie, someday your voice will save people from drowning. Someday your
Mm,
voice will save people from drowning. And she took this moment, she took this highly energetic, very loud girl, and she brought voice to my life. And it has come to my mind in these ways, what you were saying about this. How do you really have somebody's voice really be this
yeah.
innovation instead of imitation? And so there's a couple things here. Is number one is what we know about people who are drowning is that there's usually a moment in which they could call for help in which they don't. There's usually a moment that actually the drowning can be spared, but they don't voice that they need help in that moment and then devastatingly drown. And so, what I love to do is say, many of us, including myself in many seasons of life, are dying this silent death of bringing innovation to our voice, of what is inside of us that is meant to flow out of us. And there are these moments in which we could call for help, we could ask for help, we could lock into what is around us, but instead we just have this silent suffer. And the more I work with leaders, this is often what feels like what happens. I was the same way. Most businesses are birthed out of the leader's own pain. This is like historically what happens in
Sure.
mine too. Is that there's moments in which I should have called for help way sooner to really bring voice to my life. And so not only am I looking for people who are doing a silent suffer, but to remind them that help is there. And so what happens is
Mm,
often then, even when we're rescued, even when we start to click in, there are these moments in which we begin to imitate instead of innovate. There are these ways in which we in a good way we're trying to curate, right? We curate information, we curate different voices, we curate books. And so it's a great thing to be highly curated in life. I think we really learn that way. But if we curate too much and then we don't stand in confidence of our voice to then innovate for it, what happens is we are leaving a lot on the table. And so I've kind of coined this term with my business to say, bring voice to your life. How do you bring voice to your life? And many of these ways are, again, that seat to seat part where somebody has time to get their footing, their time to
yeah.
really kind of understand their story specifically and beautifully in the context of who they are, and then to look into the context in which they are. So if we try to speak out of innovation in a new context, but we haven't understand the context of our life, it takes both pairings for that magnetic pieces of us to really happen. And what we find is then that there's more innovation than imitation of the person next to us.
Okay, we've got to go back and unpack some of that because you dropped a massive amount of wisdom right there. Um, I wanna, I really want to go back to something you said about drowning, but let's talk first about business leaders, right? You work with business leaders, you work with executives, you do coaching for those that are silently suffering, as
Mhm.
you said. How do you how do you pull that out? What's like the like common theme, and everyone is wired differently. But
Yeah.
what's the common theme you're seeing in business today?
Yeah, well, I think we don't plan to have a silent suffer. I think what we have
Sure.
done as we have matured in business and in leadership and in levels is we have also mastered the level of being calculated and being very managed with our words and our emotions and who we are. And so there tends to be the more we walk around in life, we are managed and calculated to the areas around us, because the more people we are leading, the more that circle becomes smaller and smaller, that
Mm,
the authenticity part of who we are can come out. So for good reasons, for appropriate reasons, we learn these skills of how to manage our life and how to calculate our life. I love the quote that says the big difference between kids and adults is that kids don't know how to manage their face, right? Kids do not know how to manage their face. And it's like a rite of passage as an adult. And often
Oh,
with leaders is that we learn how to manage our face and we become really, really good at it for really good reasons. But often at the cost of this disintegration of who we are as just a human being and
mm,
how we are leading. And so this gap becomes greater and greater when it comes to how we can show up in very professional and appropriate ways. But if we don't continue to really tend to those parts of our inner world, what happens is the disintegration becomes greater and greater. And the incredible thing, this is what
mm.
makes me so excited about the time that we're living in, is the absolute incredible thing right now is that people are hungry for authenticity,
Yeah.
vulnerability, and a level of inner peace from people. And so, what's so cool is that if we tend to those parts of us as a leader, if we learn how in different environments we are sharing different things and we are communicating again in different ways, how to communicate in different ways, we don't have to do that at the cost of tending to our own self. But else, what we know is this is the most magnetic thing about us right now as a leader. And so, if we can do that in holistic ways, we really will have both this level of loving how we live and
Yeah.
leading well. They are not opposite. Your peace is not at the cost of me still feeling well at the end of the day. And right now, it all actually is still going together to make it all happen, which I'm very grateful for. And if we maximizes that as preachers, as church leaders, as technical artists, as people behind the scenes, we really, really can live a long life in ministry and really love it.
Yeah. I um I have a good friend that I'm connected with in the business world that is seeking to bring restoration in biblical principles of restoration to business, right?
Yeah.
And so some of the conversations we're having are around how do you navigate seeing people for who they are,
Yeah.
giving them places to thrive for who they are, and also like navigating business,
Yeah.
right? And so there are and there's a lot of business leaders out there that are trying to walk through this right now, and it's a pretty big initiative. But how do you or when do you decide to prioritize the individual story of an individual, you know, their giftings, their talents, their things versus when do I take a profit loss because of that?
Mm.
And so it's this very interesting thing but it begins, to your point, with the navigation of understanding who people are and connecting them regardless. And this is the work you're doing so well in your leadership coaching and your executive stuff that you're doing. It's the man, if we see people for who they really are, we can put them in the place that God really needs them in the kingdom as a whole, whether
Yep.
business, church, whether serving in whatever role that is. And so, just as I've had conversations with you, you are actively paving the way and helping business leaders figure that out. So, thank you. And we'll have the ability to connect with Jackie beyond this because you might find yourself going, "Hey, I need some help. I'm not sure how to pull that out of people, how to see people for who they are, or the things that God has uniquely gifted in them."
Yeah,
Um,
we're all better together. We are all better together, and there are many of us on the outside who love to bring energy to the inside, and I think those spaces are really needed. And if we can stop the silent suffers,
yeah,
then one at a time, I think we are all then showing it. And I think every investment we have as a leader into our own health, it only magnifies forward of the payback and the investment, not only for your own self and your own soul, but
yeah,
also different things you learn then of how to care for the people who you are leading and responsible for as well.
You're called to steward those
Yeah.
souls. I want to click back in, and I gave you preview of this, but like you talk about drowning, and most people that are drowning, and it sounds like you have some very like clear like statistics behind this, or there's some study, or there's something that has informed this opinion other than just Jackie. Um, Most people that are drowning have an opportunity to ask for help, and they choose not to.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So that's like a industry fact standard
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. That there is a moment when you could call out for help and instead you think you've got it. And that tends to be then something else comes about and then you're not able to ask for help after that. And so there's a moment in which you are able to it. It's like it's like when you're 6 months past due of your library book and it's
Mm.
just sitting on the shelf, and then I move it to, like, the counter before my garage, and I'm like, "Now I'm gonna grab it," and then I move it, and I put it in my car, and then I leave it in my car, and, it's usually 6 the best thing that ever happened for me is they took away late fees at our library, so I'm no longer charged, which was also the worst thing for me because timelines are really your friend in getting things done. But I often look at this I recently returned my little son did one of these like backpack activity bags and it was like a
Mhm.
firefighter thing. 3 months late, I returned the little firefighter to the library. Now, I knew where the
Wow.
guy was. He was somewhere, and I was like, "I'm never gonna rent one of these again because I never find all the pieces, and it takes me 3 months." And I went to the library, and I turned in this little firefighter man, and they had the backpack waiting behind the counter for 3 months, waiting for the little firefighter guy to return home. And for help for many of us is we're like 3 to 6 months where we
Mm.
have a sense. We have a sense to say, I probably should call that friend, or I should text that
Mm.
mentor from high school, or, oh, that woman at church who always goes up to pray for people. And every week they say you can go up for prayer. And I just, every Sunday, I'm like, oh, I got to go though. Like we're usually 3 to 6 months behind when we need to ask for help. And what if instead that became the moment that we trusted ourselves to say, this is it. That when
Mm.
I am actually not 3 to 6 months delayed, I can work better with better internal resources I have, external resources I have, the schedule at hand. Because what happens is really we don't have a neutral gear in life. We tend to just move towards maturity, or we
Yeah.
tend to decrease towards devastation. And so there's many ways in which we can choose different ways, but neutrality is not really what happens in life. I don't think we actually coast. I think there is one direction or another direction. And in many of these moments, it doesn't mean that
Ooh.
you're in it for a long time, but what if we listened to that voice inside that was like, go up for prayer. You've been watching that lady at church and you just like admire her life and you admire how she raises her kids. And what if you go up and you tell her, hey, I've got a really, really hard decision to make today. And I've got a really hard decision tomorrow on Monday when I'm back in the office. And what if we just practice these moments of bringing voice to our life, specifically in
Mm.
seasons when we knew things weren't going well? And I thought to myself when I went to the library, I thought, this bag has been waiting there for 3 months because of my one little firefighter that I have not. And help is always there. Like
Yeah.
somebody is always waiting. You are never too late. If you are
Mm.
listening today and you are 9 months, 12 months down, like it is never too late. You are one voice away, your voice away fresh hope, fresh encouragement, fresh connection, fresh ideas, somebody to listen to your story, just new strategy. And when we connect the Spirit's leading inside of us to the strategy we have in life, to the tools and the resources and the community we have, it is this perfect combination of spirit and strategy that allows all of us to move forward. And no matter where you are, again, if you're hearing this, like your bag is still waiting behind the counter. People are still there waiting to help. And also, and a sad note for myself, I thought, how many kids did not play with that bag because I did not return that? How many people also, the longer we delay as leaders,
Yeah.
also are there people that in those months we could have been serving, or we could have had fresh energy or new ideas, and instead we've kind of tucked away back
Mm.
behind the counter, like the firefighter bag, that has not allowed other children to grow and learn and play. So, and you can't take the
Yeah.
mother out of me, but I see
No,
life in
yeah.
these ways of how we all get better, and it just tends to make sense.
Well, I'm a fan of the minor prophets. And so one of the phrases, Joel, Habakkuk, like even now, and the phrase that comes after it, you could probably fill in the blank. Return to me,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
God is
Yeah.
constantly in this posture, in this position of going, not tomorrow,
Yep.
today,
Yep.
even now. Now, or just return to me. Um,
That's so good.
and and the thing I'm excited about with Apollos is we're helping churches have opportunities for that to happen throughout the week. And I'm
Yes.
gonna I'm gonna take a hot take because as a the posture has been of the local church, return to me. If you fill out a prayer card at 10:17 on Sunday morning, whenever I instruct you and give you time in the service to fill out a prayer card. And if you do, if you show up in that moment, if you want to raise your voice in that moment, and if you fill out a card, maybe by Tuesday or Wednesday, some person you've never met will call you and have the most awkward conversation with you
Yeah.
about that. And what we've missed is the even now, the
Yeah.
today, the do that, right? What we're enabling with Apollos is the immediacy of those voices to be raised and the immediacy of the church to respond to that. And to your point, like we all need that.
Mhm.
That is the life of the local church. That is the blood of of us coming together. That is the thing that we do above and beyond anything else. It's the communion of the saints, to go to the Apostles' Creed. Um,
Why every library doesn't have just "return to me" as their key phrase. I love it. I love it.
and as a
That's it.
parent, I also very much feel your pain. My child has misplaced a library book, and we are on like a 45-day like countdown to find it or pay.
Oh,
So our
man.
library hasn't introduced the um, no late penalty. They've elevated it to just buy the thing if you can't find it.
Oh,
Um,
man. Oh, man. I think
so
I think
I
I
feel
belong
your
in your
pain.
family. I think I belong in your family. This is my
It's like,
people.
I, like it never even got out of his backpack. I don't understand. It jumped ship in the land of an adolescent. So I very much resonate with that. As as we're kind of thinking through what your day to day looks like with executive coaching, you've talked a little bit about and how you're bringing wellness to people, uh, finding their story, giving them a voice of hope in the middle of that. What are some tool sets that you found that are really valuable to help discover that journey?
Yeah, I mean, it often starts with building trust with the leader. And so helping the leader to really have a holistic view of their life. And so what we know about movement is that movement begets movement. And so when
Mm.
you look at heart, mind, body, soul, everything in which we are to love God with, heart, mind, body, soul. And so everything in which we are to love God with is also everything in which restoration can come and everything in which movement can come. And what is so cool, and I'm so grateful we're created this way, is that movement in one area of life can breed movement in another area of life. And so often what I love to do
Yeah.
is really first assess holistically how the leader is doing, heart, mind, body, soul. I really
Ooh.
love the things that are holding us back that we don't even realize or know how to talk about the things that are holding us back. And so this could be, hey, I really love my job, but I'm not sure how I'm doing as a mom or dad. Or I really love my job, but I'm not sure about these hours or where I need to grow in this skill. I really love my job, but I actually have a volunteer who's better than me at my job than my job. Like all of these
Yeah.
things that just kind of we don't talk about inside, but allowing us holistically as to where we go. And so sometimes that is really starting with movement and sleep and rest. And sometimes it's,
Mm.
our emotional world that can feel very entangling. Sometimes it is our soul spiritual side. We know this firsthand from ministry is we're likely not actually going to church on Sunday. We are volunteering and we're serving and we're doing other things within the building, but the moments of worship in which we have. And so, how can we get creative in that? What does that look like on our car rides? What are we listening to?
Yeah.
How are
Yep.
we growing with our mind? And so, what I find for most of us is we all actually have the energy we need. And so, usually, when I start working with a leader, there's some area of life that we feel tired in, we feel bored,
Yeah.
we feel, again, dissatisfied. We don't feel like we have enough energy. And what I like to do is to reframe and to say, let's assess heart, mind, body, soul, what's really happening in your life. Let's give voice to that in your personal life. Let's give voice to that in your professional life. Let's see if we can unpack some things. But then what I find for most of us is that, if scripture says we'll have all the energy we need to do what we need to do, then we got to believe that. And so what does that look like? Because I get very tired. We have kids from age 6 to 16 right now. And so I'm like driver's ed to dinosaurs on the ground. Like I'm tired. And
Yeah.
what happens is we have this realm of wellness that's heart, mind, body, soul. But then also we know that we contend with the spiritual energy that the spirit puts
Mm.
inside of us. So we're not contending just with human energy. We are open energy systems. We're not closed energy systems that it's just dependent on our own human energy. So how do we steward that as a leader, but then also this spiritual realm of how do we contend with the energy in which the spirit gives inside of us? And so one of the main practices that I have seen really helpful for leaders is to say, what if we believe we actually have all the energy we need for what we're required to do? So maybe there's some things we're doing that we shouldn't be doing.
Mm.
Maybe there's some things for Q4. Maybe, right? We can do a holistic audit of saying maybe some things need to come off. But what if on a day to day basis, we say, I actually have all the energy I need for what's ahead of me? And what we begin to see as leaders is that we often are spinning energy instead of spending energy. And so there are these moments in which we begin to spin. What if? What if I'm not good enough? What if this volunteer takes my role? What if I can't handle my schedule? What if, what if, what if? And we begin to spin. We begin to perhaps overeat or overindulge or we over have anxiety or we begin to take in so much information. And what if instead, when we find ourselves in these spinning patterns, we just say, I'm going to spend the energy instead of spin the energy. And this is where we put action to all the energy we have. And so what happens is, if somebody is highly anxious, which makes a lot of sense that a leader would be highly anxious right now. What
Mm.
if we viewed that anxiety as the groundwork for spending the energy of what is coming up? And not to simplify anxiety, but what if we start with the framework of saying, you've got all you need? Let's figure out this human energy component, heart, mind, body, soul, but let's also figure
Mm.
out this. How are we contending with the spiritual giftedness, with the energy of our team, with the skills that you have around you? And if we instead go from spinning to spending, we start acting and we start putting actions in front of us and we try and we fail and we learn and we discover and we innovate and we come up with new creative ideas. And so that has been a practice at which, when I walk with leaders through it, simply believing that you do have everything you need within how we can heart, mind, body, soul, but then also within the spirit's energy within you and the community around you. Again, where are we inviting people into areas that we need help? Where are we pulling key volunteers in ways that we know we are not gifted at bringing the donuts? Where are we bringing in people in which, instead of spinning, we can actually be spending energy? And what I have found is some of these simple reframings allow us to
Mm.
gain our footing. And they allow us to gain our footing back to try again. And that's when movement is created, is again, this just trying again, not the neutral gear in life, but the trying again, the movement forward.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking through, like, uh of first the parable of the talents, as Jesus teaches, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of lost this in the Western sense that we think everyone should have the 10 talents.
Yeah.
But Jesus doesn't give everyone, he doesn't give an example where everyone gets 10 talents. And so it's about stewarding the place, the opportunities that you have in the midst of that. But you go to I believe it's Mark's gospel, that the Holy Spirit is described as the helper,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, hey, the living, the life flowing out of the Holy Spirit within you, right? It is a suitable helper for you. And just even the recentering, for me as a leader, I think for so many, is just living the life out of the thing that God has already put inside of you, and not trying to manufacture more on our own, or not trying to live in comparison to another soul that has more talents on the table as a result of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one
Yes.
of the reasons that when you do that as a leader and you can just relax a bit in who you are, how you're created, where you need to put and spend that energy and where you need to ask for help. One of the tools I love to incorporate is Working Genius tool, because
Hmm.
often what we think is that we have to come out with all six geniuses. It's this incredible tool that's really helpful for teams. Patrick Lencioni developed this tool, and the more I do this with leaders and teams, what tends to happen is a leader thinks they need to have every single genius. And I've done hundreds of these now, and nobody comes out with every single genius. But we all expect that we have all the talents, to your point, or we
Mm.
have all the geniuses. And instead, we are meant to be interdependent on each other. We are meant to be one body with different parts. We are meant to be interdependent. And so, these different tools that allow us as a leader to assess where we are. How do we spend the energy
Oh.
instead of spend the energy? And then what are these tools that can say, now, how do I get to know my team? How do I figure out what I have here? And how are we interdependent on each other? And then that's just the movement and the momentum forward to make the vision come to life of what you have been called
Mm.
to steward.
Yeah. And um, for context, Jackie, you've come in and helped facilitate Working Genius within the Apollos team. And I'd just say, like, from a really practical standpoint, it's given us a common language,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so it's tenacity is one of those things where it's like, okay, we're in a meeting and it's like, we need somebody to bring the tenacity, the ability to, like, close it out
Yeah.
and do the gritty thing that a lot of us are not wired to do, right? And so it's like we're searching for that in a team meeting. So that is just a super practical way that you've impacted the Apollos team, and I know that you're impacting other organizations that you work with, and I know you do so much beyond that. I would love to get people connected with you. So as a part of this, what we'll do is we'll be sharing your contact information, how people can reach out to you, where to follow you on all the socials, because that's the world we live in today. um, and just I would just say, if you need help discovering the who you are, if you need the voice of drowning and to be discovered, to be brought out of you, to be rescued, Jackie is a very trusted source to our team, and know that she would steward and care for you as well as she has done for our team. So thank you for the conversation today, Jackie. Thank you for being someone that thinks about church differently, that not so different that we're recreating the wheel, because we're just trying to do the thing that Jesus taught us to do. But you're doing it in such new and refreshing ways. So thank you for our conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thanks for all the good work you do and all the connection points and tools and resources that you offer. It's a beautiful piece of being interconnected in the work we do. And so
Yeah.
grateful for you. Thank you.
Have a great day. See ya.
Bye.